We're always free to choose. To believe what we want to believe. But when you step back, when you really look at where you've been and the things you've done, your past will come to devour you.
Now that's an immediate tone setter. The ominous nature of the title screen lets you know that this is going to be a much different run through the studio.
There you go, little guy.
And only 800 more frames to go. No way I'm getting through tonight without some coffee. Probably some downstairs.
So, fun little secret here. You're supposed to stand up to begin the game, but if you do nothing for 20 minutes, you get a secret ending. Oh, when games get quirky like that. The real world. We don't spend a whole lot of time here, but it's really cool to see what the real world of Bendy looks like, considering that we spent almost all of our time in the studio in the previous game. There are even secrets like a mirror jump scare and a puppet in this bucket.
Wilson? You scared me to death.
I'm sorry, my dear. Didn't mean to frighten you. You're working late tonight. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be wandering around all by yourself. Mind if I step in?
Of course not.
Thank you. Audrey, you look like you could use a little company.
Okay, I like Wilson as a villain for reasons we'll get to later on, but how and why does Audrey trust him even a little bit here? I mean, look at him. I know janitors in media are commonly portrayed as grumpy old men, but this guy is so obviously evil that it's borderline parody. This segment's a callback to the first chapter of Bendy and the Ink Machine, where we gather all the items for the pedestals, and it's rather cute. It doesn't feel like cheap nostalgia bait, it feels like genuine love for the original work was placed here. Dang, the studio sure received a glow up. The original game had a very strong hand-drawn art style that made it stand out from the crowd, but it also got visually repetitive as you continued. So to go from that to this is quite the contrast. Dark Revival polished up basically everything about the original's graphics, while also giving it a hint of edge to coincide with the darker tone of this game. You know, jump scares in horror games are very difficult to pull off correctly. Ever since FNAF popularized them, people have seemed to learn all the wrong lessons from utilizing jump scares effectively, often being telegraphed too far in advance, or just being loud noises that make you jump and nothing else. The latter even being called cheap scares by some people. Luckily, Dark Revival actually knows what makes a good jump scare. It not only hits you when you least expect it, but it's also accompanied by a legitimate danger you got to escape. In fact, I can only point out 3 cheap scares in the entire game, and they're fairly harmless, all things considered.
I wouldn't drink too much of that if I were you. It helps patch you up, but the aftertaste, it's not so good.
Allison Angel was a very odd character in the original. She didn't show up until the end of Chapter 4 and barely had any time to be fleshed out. The only thing we knew is that she was a better Alice Angel than the actual Alice Angel, and had a wolf named Tom. Here, while she's still not that much more fleshed out, she does have more involvement in the story this time, which is good for a previously stale character. I like how Audrey realistically reacts to her situations. From the moment she enters the ink world, her reactions are of understandable worry and fear, occasional wonder at the environment, and sometimes a bit of snarkiness to offset her fear. And none of it is overbearing, or annoying, or extremely out of character for someone her age. Hey, we got actual upgrades in this game. The previous game had none of that, so this is a cool addition. Plus, the locations of some of these containers are fairly creative and might get your brain thinking. Let's talk about stealth in this game. This game ain't Metal Gear or Splinter Cell, so the stealth is the fairly basic affair you find in most horror games. You crouch behind cover, being careful to stay out of the lost one's sight. Not win-worthy, but not sin-worthy either. What is sin-worthy is the fact that if you don't want to take them out, you gotta endure the constant dialogue the lost ones spout off every 5 seconds. And they only have 5 lines of dialogue. Granted, there are different performances of those lines, but there's only so many times you can hear,
Don't cry for me. I want to die.
or
I tried to tell them he was up to something. I tried to tell them.
before it starts making you crazy. Now, when you're not sneaking around enemies, you're using your gen pipe to kill enemies. And this combat is bad. How do I best describe the combat? Well, it's basically if you took a look at Dying Light's combat and sucked away all the intricacies that made it work. All you do is bash enemies endlessly, hoping that they'll die before you do. There's no real way to dodge outside of an ability we'll get to later, and the upgrades you get for the gen pipe don't really help that much. 2 of them aren't even combat related, and the one that is an automatic win button that's ultimately a waste, since it uses batteries that you need for unlocking locked doors. So unless you constantly hide between strikes, fighting anything directly is going to lead to you dying more than anything else. And even then, that doesn't matter too much since there's almost no consequence to getting killed. You just climb out of one of those ink pools completely fine, further proving how terrible engaging in combat is. Thankfully, the special abilities you're given are good. The first one, gifted to you by the ink, is the Banish ability. It's your stealth kill that's your other automatic win button. It even regenerates your health, but you do have to be wary of nearby lost ones as they can still spot you after you perform a banish. Next up is the Flow ability given to you by Porter after you help him. It's a teleport that lets you get across gaps and kind of dodge enemy attacks. That latter option isn't very helpful against normal enemies, but it's nice to have a means of getting around faster. Lastly, there's the Fast Travel ability, given to you by Heidi after a game of hide and seek. It's probably the most useless ability in a casual run, but for any completionists out there, aka me, it's a more than welcome addition.
That's one leap of faith I definitely won't make.
So the game expects you to come back here with the Flow ability in order to get across this gap, but it turns out you actually can make the jump without it. There's just an invisible wall that won't let you. I love the animation department showcase. Not only does it feel like an actual attraction that Joey Drew Studios made for guests that may have visited the studio, but it also has 3 relatively normal setups, but then has this rather morbid 4th setup. Great subversion of expectations. Little Bendy, we got Little Bendy in the house. He's my second son and I love him. The Ink Demon talks now, and he sounds like Smaug. Awesome. And he's got a redesign that's equally awesome. I'm probably one of the few people that like the original Ink Demon design, but even I gotta admit that this glow-up is so much better. He actually looks like a demon. They even gave him goat hooves. He also fulfills the role of Invincible Stalker. He behaves somewhat like he did in Chapter 3 of Bendy and the Ink Machine, where he periodically pops up forcing you to hide until he leaves. However, unlike in Bendy and the Ink Machine, he doesn't just do this for one section or even one chapter. After this room, he pursues you throughout the entire rest of the game. And you always feel his presence as he pursues you, especially with his periodic speeches. Plus, if he does catch you before you can hide, he has several different animations for each time he kills you. Now that's a great stalker enemy. So remember how I said that jump scares should be more than just loud noises that make you jump and nothing else? Well, there is one exception to the rule in the form of Carly, the fourth member of the Butcher Gang. Carly is a ghost girl that will pop up in random places to try to take a piece of your health. She can't kill you, but she can put you at a disadvantage. Why is she an exception, you ask? Because not only is she another thing to put you on edge throughout the game, but she's entirely optional. Carly only activates if you open her box, so if you don't want to deal with her, you can just ignore her entirely. Also, it gives posture anxiety, and that's funny.
Oh my god! Oh!
Something funny's going on around here.
Daco cameo! So the Searchers in the first game were your main type of enemy, but here they only show up once for an ambush in the locker room. That's neither a win nor a sin, but what is a win is the remix theme for the Searchers. For reference, this is the original theme. And this is the remix. Artist's Rest is the most annoying area in the game. While I do like the idea of it being a place for the workers to sleep so they didn't have to go home every day, there are just way too many lost ones roaming about, making it almost impossible to navigate without being spotted. The only way you can make it out on any difficulty that's not easy is to systematically banish each individual lost one near a hiding spot and then hide until they get far enough away to not hear you come out. If that sounds tedious, it is, but it's your only option if you don't want to get swarmed. So Bendy's history with bosses is hit and miss. The first game had a couple decent bosses, one not so good boss, and one mixed boss. Dark Revival kind of follows suit with its first boss, the King Widow. You gotta avoid the small spiders and hit the switches on the pillars in order to get the King Widow to show up. And when it does, you gotta keep your distance, get small swipes in when you can, and take out its spawn when it spits them at you. I'm not sure whether to win or sin this fight. On the one hand, if you know what you're doing, it's not that bad. But on the other hand, the little spiders can easily take you out if you're not careful. I guess it's not really that special all around, so I'll give it a not as bad as you could have been sin. The reveal of Joey Drew. Early on in the game, it's made clear that Joey died of old age before the events of the game. So to see him as a middle-aged man in the Ink world is quite a surprise. Even more surprising is that he reveals that the Ink world is a cycle that's being held in place by Wilson, and that we're the only ones who can stop him. But not before dropping one more bombshell.
You made this world. Why can't you fix it?
Because I'm not the man. I'm just the memory.
Yes, Joey is indeed dead. The man we saw was merely a physical manifestation of his memories put here by the original. For what purpose? Well, that's his riddle to solve. The Lord of Muck fight is the worst boss in this game. Hell, it doesn't even deserve to be called a boss fight. It's a glorified enemy encounter, and considering how bad the combat is, you can already smell the problems. There's also the fact that this doesn't really affect the story all that much. The most you get out of it is opening a door and a shit ton of resources. I appreciate the world building and the idea around this underground cult leader, but other than that, this guy and this fight have little reason to exist. Chapter 4 has the best environment in the game. After going through the studio and sewers, we reach an entire outside area to explore. Having an entire town in the Bendy art style is a cool idea, and they really took advantage of it. Also, Little Bendy is your companion for this part, and he's so much better than Buddy Boris from the first game. He actually sits on nearby benches and helps you out when trying to find a keycard for a certain area. It also helps that he's just plain adorable.
Well, geez, you haven't gotten far.
Don't do that! Wait. How did you get in here?
Audrey, you literally saw him phase through a wall earlier. Why are you asking that? The return to Chapter 1. I absolutely love this part of the game. It's not a complete recreation of Chapter 1 of Bendy and the Ink Machine, but it's filled with a lot from said chapter, including the very first tape from the game and Henry's old desk. It's just a brilliant homage. Not only that, but in this one scene, we learn everything about the Ink world. The studio we traversed in both this and the previous game was not the real Joey Drew Studios. It's a completely separate world made by the Ink Machine, where Joey placed all his failures and memories. Why? Because he hated his former partner Henry. He was so unwilling to admit his own mistakes that he made the Ink world specifically to torture his own version of Henry for eternity. Until he met Allison Pendle, who showed him a better side of himself that even he didn't know existed. And in response, he made Allison Angel for Henry, a light to guide him through the cycle. But last but not least, we learn the truth about Audrey. Turns out, she is Joey Drew's daughter, made from the Ink Machine. That's why the Ink gave her those powers, why the Ink Demon has been so persistent with her, and why she doesn't remember her past. All these revelations in one scene, and it's perfectly written in. And yet another revelation that little Bendy and the Ink Demon are the same. Granted, this one was easier to deduce since the Ink Demon wasn't around whenever Bendy was, but I can imagine it catching a lot of people off guard.
I don't like to ask questions.
Super Horror Bro cameo. The Keepers. Wilson's own creations made in his image. These freakish abominations are essentially replacements for the Ink Demon since he can't follow you into this area. They're completely invincible and patrol the ruins ahead. While there is an upgrade you can find for your gent pipe that lets you stun them for a bit, it's hardly worth it and your best option is to avoid them altogether. Plus the distorted speech and snake-like designs make them even creepier.
That's where the ghosts live. Just beyond that door, the Keeper's prison, the pit. No one ever comes out. At least, they're never quite the same. But I could open the door for you. I do know how. I really do.
Thank you. That would...
But first, maybe play a game? Oh, I love to play games. I like hide and seek best. Find me and I'll open the door for you. I promise. Look away while I hide, and no peeking.
Heidi is a precious girl. Must protect.
Experiment 26. Frequent delays due to the Ink Demon's refusal to terminate. Keepers administered quarter-hourly sessions of physical tortures and surgical invasions to wear down his power.
Explanations for how the Ink Demon became Bendy, and further evidence as to how unstoppable the Ink Demon is. So Big Steve here, that's his actual name by the way, is part of a small side quest. He's blocking the way to the upgrade I mentioned earlier, and to get him to move, you gotta go all the way back to the cafe in Chapter 1, grab a hidden ink heart, and bring it back to him to eat. Not that difficult or interesting if you have Heidi's fast travel, but it is nice to make Steve happy, and a little extra goodies don't hurt either. The Containment Room. This place is filled with all the major characters from the previous game except for Allison, Tom, the Ink Demon, and apparently Alice Angel too. We got the projectionist's head after it was ripped off by the Ink Demon, Bertrand's head removed from his carousel, Sammy Lawrence, and most importantly, Henry, the protagonist of Bendy and the Ink Machine. Yup, the guy that previously had no identity whatsoever due to not having a character model, now has a face we can attach to. And he looks like James Sunderland. He also reveals how to restart the cycle and undo everything Wilson has done. Is it nostalgia bait given how long it's been since the first game? Yes, and I don't care at all because it's awesome. The final area in the game is Wilson's Retreat, and it's quite pretty. It's got everything from a library to a fancy suite to a fountain at the entrance. Wilson even has a corny painting of him killing the ink demon. He's such a narcissist.
Did you have any questions?
Is it always night here?
It's always dark, if that's what you mean. For as long as I can remember.
Are you very old?
No. As far as I understand it, I'm something quite new. Although, I didn't turn out the way I was supposed to. One in a long line of failed experiments. But Wilson will keep trying.
And do you trust Wilson?
This is the realm of the ink demon. The shadow hangs over us all. I don't trust anyone. But Wilson takes care of me, keeps me safe. He once said I remind him of something he called his mother. Tell me, is that a good thing, where you two are from?
Betty is such a sweet person. I like that she's not completely innocent, but she wants to be a good hostess. It's also not made clear she knows about Wilson's dark secrets, and it's ultimately for the best.
Now, just 3 sips of water. 1... 2... 3.
Alice Angel jump scare. The dining room puzzle is probably the best puzzle in the game. You gotta listen to hints from the lost ones around the table and use them to figure out the solution. Get it wrong and you'll be electrocuted to death. It actually got me to think for a bit, and there's even an achievement for getting it right the first time. Also, the solution is a reference to the FNAF 1 animatronics. That's brilliant. Now for the Alice Angel boss fight. Armed with Sammy's Tommy gun, she'll shoot you the moment she sees you, and you gotta be careful of that. Keep behind cover and make your way towards her on the balcony to banish her. Fairly simple, but not offensive, and the ending is really good. After falling off the balcony, Alice attempts to finish you off, but Allison stabs her just like in the first game. This time, however, Alice gets a chance to see her killer, and is amazed to see her own face, but perfect. Pretty good boss fight all around. Before we get into the final stretch, let's discuss the completion process of Bendy and the Dark Revival. In terms of collectibles, there are memories that take the shape of items from Audrey's childhood, audio logs from the studio employees, and notes from both the employees and the crazy lost ones. You'll also need to collect all 9 ink containers for the health, stamina, and flow upgrades, and the 3 upgrades for the gem pipe. And there's also 24 Illusion of Living books littered around the studio that'll net you a secret insanity ending. As for achievements, aside from story-related ones and the ones I mentioned, there's one for banishing 25 enemies, killing 25 enemies with a shock pipe, surviving 25 ink demon attacks, eating 100 food items, spending 500 slugs, and finding the 10 hidden meatly cutouts, some of which you'll come across naturally, others you can use cheese tactics for, and the last one a guide can help with. The only one that might cause you trouble is the Ink Master achievement, which involves beating the whole game without dying. And even then, you can just set the game to easy, unless you're Postra, who deliberately tortured himself on a live stream for it. Of course, I took the easy way out, because in the words of Dr. Eggman,
Work smarter, not harder.
all in all, a fairly comfortable completion experience, if a little time-consuming, but that's to be expected when going for 100% in any game. The stairs to Wilson's lab have such a great build-up to the final stretch of the game. For several hours, we've been subjected to hand-drawn walls with no color other than black and beige, but as we descend, we're hit with actual color. It's very pretty, yet feels alien to this world of ink, and it perfectly shows Wilson's role in the story. In his mind, he's bringing order to this world of chaos, which manifests in these colors.
Thank you for coming all this way. The Ink Demon is a formidable foe. To truly destroy such a monster, he must be dethroned, humiliated. For months now, I've been working on something that will do exactly that. Cast out the demon and put a new deity in his place. Stronger, more powerful, and controllable. Together, we just need to unleash our ultimate weapon. Come, let me show you my creation. Isn't he beautiful? Simple but elegant. A treasure. Powerful beyond anyone. The ink demon will fall, and we can have peace at last.
It could work, but it sounds risky. How will we control him? We don't want to repeat Joey's mistake.
No, we don't. All of the factors must be perfect. The right design, the right science, and the right soul. At last your purpose is revealed, Audrey. This is why you're here. With your soul inside him, my creation will live forever.
Stay away from me. You're insane.
Come now, Audrey. Part of you knew this was your path. Leave yourself behind and ascend.
I thought you said we needed to save your father. I thought you had a plan to send me home, to make everything right.
I lied. My father is beyond hope. Perhaps you know him. Nathan Arch, owner of Archgate, industrial genius, business tycoon. For years I've lived in his reaching shadow. He always had time for the grand creatives of the world, the doers, as he called them. He knew only the best, the biggest thinkers. How could his lowly son ever hope to compete with that?
This is why Wilson is such a great villain. He looks as stereotypically evil as you can get, but he's much more nuanced. His inferiority complex makes him believe that this is the only way he can be great. And yet, when you stop and think about it, all of his work here in the Ink world further showcases how inferior he really is. All of his creations, the Keepers, the various buildings, Betty, they only came about because he stood on the shoulders of actual geniuses. The Gent Corporation hired by Joey were the ones who made the tech in the first place, from the ink machine to the signal towers. None of this was truly his ideas. He merely took what others had made and twisted it to fit his vision. And his vision, no matter how hard he tries, will never be comparable to the work of Joey or his father. Speaking of which, I'm sure many of you are asking, how the heck is his father alive? Well, Wilson's an old man. Well, the answer is Wilson isn't an old man. In the archives, where information on how the characters were made, it says on Wilson's bio that multiple trips to the ink world cause his health to deteriorate. It's why he's constantly wheezing, likely can't see out of his right eye, and has gray hair. Even his design was carefully thought out. What's more, he gets a fittingly gruesome demise. Seriously, if not for the ink, this would be an M-rated game, and I'd be all for it. Now it's time for the final boss, Ship Ahoy Wilson. His OC now possessed by Wilson and turned into a horrific monster. This is the best fight in the game. Wilson will throw his giant anchor and gears at you, as well as summon colorized lost ones that are pure cannon fodder. And you'll have to get him to destroy the covers on the towers and use the gent pipe to deactivate them. After that, Wilson attacks you directly with claw swipes. You'll have to wait until he tries to attack at the anchor, only for it to get stuck, and then wail on him in the center. After enough loops, you'll banish Wilson forever, the body will then tear off Audrey's legs, and the ink demon will swoop in and kill it for good. Pretty good final boss for this game standards. It's also got a pretty good final boss theme. It's not especially memorable, I definitely heard better themes elsewhere, but this one has a unique sailor vibe mixed with the traditional Bendy music that makes it feel unique. This speech from the Ink Demon may sound like just normal manipulation, but there's a much deeper meaning in it. You see, he isn't just trying to convince Audrey to merge with him, he's projecting onto her. The Ink Demon was born to be a living version of Bendy, but he came out all wrong due to his lack of a soul. As a result, he was contained and likely abused for a very long time, until finally breaking out and destroying everything. He may be very spiteful, vicious, and angry towards everything around him, but there's no one he hates more than himself. He views himself as a mistake because that's how everyone treated him from the day he was born. We seriously went from a mindless monster with no soul to a layered, sympathetic villain in just 2 games. That's excellent writing. And for the final stretch of the game, we get to play as the Ink Demon. The controls are a bit stiff, but I can give that a pass because the rest of the sequence is incredible. Every character shows up here to help you reset the cycle. Allison, Big Steve with Tom on his shoulder, Porter and Heidi as brief cameos, Sammy with 3 lines of dialogue before getting shot, and even Henry plays a part in it. All of this coupled with the amazing music makes this the perfect ending to the game.
My father once told me that just because we're born of darkness doesn't mean we belong to it. We're always free to choose. And here, at the very beginning, there's a choice to make. My father's cartoon world was now mine, to rule, to watch over, and to protect. I can make the cycle more bearable for my friends inside. But as for me, I'm the first of my kind. Born of ink, but living in flesh. Joey's world is escaping into ours. So, what's next?
Setting up future games with Bendy in the real world and Jen taking back the ink machine. After a game like this, I'm more than hyped for another game. When this game was first announced, there was considerable hype around it. People loved the first game and were excited to see where the franchise would go next. However, as time passed, we got less and less stuff about the game, and many assumed it had been quietly canceled, with only a handful of die-hard fans holding out hope that it would eventually release. In fact, if you guys recall, I made a bet that if nothing appeared by Halloween, I would eat my copy of Bendy novel Dream Come True, to which I got a myriad of replies. But thankfully, the game came out at last, and turned out to be something truly special. There are definitely parts of this game that could have used some tweaking, but considering how the rest of it is really polished and well made, I would say that the wait was ultimately worth it. It's pretty much unanimously agreed that Dark Revival, as its name suggests, revived the Bendy franchise into something greater than it was, and the only ones who don't like it are part of the very small crowd that hates mascot horror, thinks it needs to die a horrible death, and are willing to twist scenarios in order to make it sound like they have a good point. Luckily, that crowd is largely ignored. As for me, I personally could take this game's greatness a step further. I not only believe that this game revived Bendy, but I believe that this game solidified Bendy as the king of mascot horror. I know hardcore FNAF fans are going to argue that FNAF is still the king since, disregarding creepypastas, it was the first, and it's by far the biggest brand in the mascot horror landscape. However, bigger doesn't equal better, and being the first doesn't mean you're the best. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the newer games for what they're worth, and I'm very excited for Help Wanted 2 and the movie, but it's clear that FNAF's glory days are well behind itself, and the franchise has changed into something almost unrecognizable from those first few games. Plus, let's face the facts, the lore of the franchise is unsolvable, and the longer it keeps going, the more unsolvable it becomes, regardless of how many people go insane trying to solve it. As for Bendy's contemporaries, the only one I can see having a shot at the crown is Poppy Playtime, and that's not even finished yet. It definitely has a lot of passion and care put into it, but I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch. Regarding the rest, Garten of Banban is Garten of Banban, Rainbow Friends is Rainbow Friends, Hello Neighbor doesn't count, Baldi's more of a troll series when the new game is taking forever to release, and while smaller games like My Friendly Neighborhood, Amanda the Adventurer, and Choo Choo Charles are really good, they don't really have the same staying power as the big three. So yeah, unless FNAF gets a dark revival of its own or Bendy gets a security breach level disaster, Bendy reigns supreme as the best of mascot horror. As for next time, it'll be one of two things. Either a special video regarding a challenge I had with the former mascot horror king, or a revisit to a past countdown of mine. Which one will be decided as time goes on? Who knows? Maybe I'll have enough time to do both before Halloween. But that's just wishful thinking. See you next time, everybody!